Hello everyone and welcome to Medicated Housewife DIY, where crafting and mental health come together. My name is Sarah. In today's DIY video, new fall tray DIY, bonus Dollar Tree printer own custom decoupage tissue paper, we are making 3 gorgeous fall decor farmhouse trays, plus learning how to print our own custom design tissue paper on a regular inkjet printer. Personalized tissue paper for gifts or decor. The possibilities are endless and you're gonna love them. So stick around and let's go make some stuff and jump right into this. To begin with, I will link all the supplies I used in the description box below. We're using some regular freezer paper that you can buy at any supermarket, and this is not parchment paper or waxed paper. It's freezer paper. They are not the same thing. I rip a piece off and you'll notice that there's a shiny side and a dull side. I put a little pencil mark on the dull side so that I can easily tell them apart. And now just a note, there are many ways of making your own tissue paper. This is just the one that I prefer. I am using a piece of printer paper as a template and I trace the printer paper onto the freezer paper, and then I just trim that freezer paper down to printer paper size. So I'm left with a nice 8.5 by 11 inch sheet of freezer paper. I've heated up my regular household iron to the cotton setting with no steam, and I grab this scrap cotton napkin, and it's scrap because it's stained and I no longer use it. The first thing we're going to want to do is iron that napkin so it has no major wrinkles. Then we take our 8.5 by 11 inch freezer paper and we place the shiny side down onto the cotton napkin, and we know which side that is because we marked the non-shiny side already. And I'm going to firmly press the freezer paper and napkin together with my iron. This will adhere the two together. I then peel the freezer paper off the napkin, then I place it back down, press it, and then peel it off again. I repeat this press and peel a third time and then a fourth time. Now, the reason I'm ironing this freezer paper onto cotton and peeling it off again is to make the paper less sticky. I want it to be sticky when it's heated, but not so sticky that it is hard to remove. So I ended up doing this press and peel 4 times. I laid down a piece of parchment paper to protect my surface from the heat. Then I take a piece of Dollar Tree white tissue paper, and that's from the card and gift section of Dollar Tree, and I cut a manageable piece off. I ironed a couple of the wrinkles out of that tissue paper, and the tissue paper also has a shiny side and a dull side. We want to print onto that dull side, so we will place the shiny side of the tissue paper against the shiny side of the freezer paper, so it is shiny on shiny. And I run my iron over the freezer and tissue paper together firmly, really pressing down when I go over the edges and the corners because I really want the paper to stay together and not peel off while we're trying to print it in the printer. Hopefully that makes sense. Then I trim the excess tissue paper off of the edges so that it's the exact same size as my freezer paper. I found this very fall looking image on publicdomainpictures.net, and I will link all that info in the description box below for you, but these are public domain images that you can use for free. I set my printer to regular settings for a piece of plain printer paper with no border if possible, and I've placed my freezer tissue paper combo into the printer the correct way so that the image is going to print onto the tissue paper side and not the freezer paper side, and then wait for it to print. I take the printed image and now I want to peel the tissue paper away from the freezer paper backing. Since tissue is very delicate, you need to do this carefully and slowly, and if it starts to tear, you can try coming in from another direction to avoid ripping the actual design. Sometimes you do get some small tears or rips, that's okay, but the reason I ironed the paper onto the cotton so many times is to try and make this separation just a little bit easier. And after all of that, I saw an image I liked better, so I did the exact same steps with this other image and I decided to use this one instead. For the base of my tray, I'm going to use this clipboard from Dollar Tree that I already pried the clamp off of from the top, and I filled up those little holes with a dab of hot glue. I am going to paint this entire thing, the front, back, and edges, with Apple Barrel matte black acrylic paint. I will link that for you below. And I end up doing 2 full coats of this black paint. Once my paint is dry, I grab this Mod Podge from Dollar Tree and I give the tray side of my base a full coat, allow that to dry, and then give it another full coat of Mod Podge. And then I allow that to fully dry. We are going to be using the iron-on method of decoupage, so we need fully dry layers of Mod Podge. While the Mod Podge is drying on my new image that I've decided to use, instead of the old one, I use some plain water and a soft paintbrush, and I brush the water around the image so that I can then gently tear off all of the parts of this image that I don't want to use. You don't want to let this image get too wet, or it could rip in places that you don't want it to. So do this part gently and very carefully. I needed to make sides for my tray, so using Tumbling tower blocks and Dollar Tree wood glue, I assemble 4 sides for my tray in the formation that you see me doing here. And I glued those 4 sides, and then I put them aside to dry before assembling all of them together. Now, everyone knows, or maybe you don't know this, but when you decoupage tissue paper or a printed napkin, it usually needs to go onto a white or light surface so that your printed design can be seen. Well, our tray is black, so our printed tissue paper might get a little muted and hard to see. So I thought to myself, what if I paint the underside of the paper, and that's the side that's not printed on? What if I paint that main lighter part of the image with white paint so that it really pops on the black background? Now, I had never heard of this before. Maybe this is a regular thing, so I'm not claiming to have invented it or anything. It's just something I had never seen or tried before, so I figured I'd experiment. I'm using Folk Art Home Decor white chalk paint and a super soft brush because remember that tissue paper is delicate, and I am painting on the shiny side of that tissue paper. That's the unprinted side, but I can see the image perfectly because the paper is pretty translucent. I picked out some of the parts I wanted to really pop against the black, and I painted them with the white chalk paint. Then I carefully put my tissue paper image aside so that all of that white paint would fully dry. Once the paint on my image was dry, I was pretty happy with how vivid the colors stood out on the black. So mission accomplished there. It was time to iron the tissue paper onto the tray base, which remember is coated with 2 coats of dried Mod Podge. I had never decoupaged this way before, so you are joining me on the maiden voyage here. I set my iron to medium, no steam, placed my image covered with some parchment paper to protect it, iron the image with some pretty firm pressure all around, paying very close attention to the edges of the image. Then I will slowly peel off the parchment paper, and like magic, my image is decoupaged with no wrinkles. So my tissue paper is firmly attached to the tray base, and I want to paint over some of the edges around the image so that it will look more blended into the tray. I want the whole thing to look like someone has painted this beautiful fall painting onto this tray with stroke marks and everything. So I'm using some black chalk paint, some folk art chalk paint in the colors Nautical and Grotto as well. I'm really channeling my inner artist. I don't know who she is, but we are channeling her. And I just feather some colors wherever I think that they will blend nicely. Darker in some spots, lighter in others. You can get really creative with this part, then just let those paints fully dry. I paint my tumbling tower block tray sides with some black chalk paint, both front and back and all sides, and once they've dried, I used Titebond Quick and Thick wood glue. I will link that for you below, and I glue the 4 tray sides to the tray base. And just a note, you can seal your image on the tray with a water-based sealer. I would not, however, recommend using Mod Podge to do that, because if you paint wet Mod Podge on top of the ironed on tissue paper image, you could end up reactivating that Mod Podge that's under the image, and it could cause some wrinkles. I used a light coat of Krylon Carmar varnish. I will link that for you below. And this is how my new fall decor decoupaged tray turned out. I was so excited about the custom printed tissue paper because I don't know about you, but I have a really hard time finding napkins with images that I actually want to decoupage. So this opens up a world of possibilities. I love the image on this tray. I think it's so fall looking, and the tray itself has some farmhouse charm in my opinion. But I want to know what you think. Let me know in the comments what you think about this decoupaged fall tray, and if you'd give this custom printed tissue paper a try for yourself. For the second DIY, we are using these 2 small wood trays from Dollar Tree. Using the same freezer paper technique as DIY number 1, we have printed 2 smaller fall-themed images onto tissue paper, and we've already peeled them off of the freezer paper backing. For the first tray, I'm using this green background image of a rooster. So I'm going to paint my wood tray with Apple Barrel Ivy Green. For the second tray, I needed a warm brown background, so I'm using Apple Barrel Melted Chocolate mixed with just a drop or 2 of King's Gold and Barn Red. I will link those for you below. I then paint that entire tray and I set it aside to dry. I gave the green tray 2 coats of Mod Podge, and the brown tray got 2 coats of Mod Podge as well. I used the water and soft brush technique to tear off the excess tissue paper away from the rooster image, just like we did in DIY number 1, carefully ripping and tearing. Then I did that exact same thing to the corn image. I used white chalk paint to paint the back of my tissue paper image to make some of those lighter colors really pop on the darker background. I carefully put the tissue image aside to fully dry, and then I painted the back of the corn image the exact same way. I have this little mini heat press iron that I used to use for applying decals to sneakers in another life. It's not the perfect tool for this, but since my household iron was too big to fit in these trays, I had to make do. I am sure that there are better mini irons you could use for this, and I will try to find something better for you and link it below, but I had to use this one. The same way we ironed the tissue paper onto the larger tray, I cut a piece of parchment paper to fit inside the tray to protect the image, and I applied pressure with my iron to melt that tissue paper into the dried Mod Podge. It was a weird angle with the sides of this mini tray, but I did the best I could. I then did the same iron-on technique with the second mini tray. I then got some paint colors like I used on the tray base, and I used some light feathering strokes to paint over the edges between the tissue paper and the actual tray. And I was just trying to blend them all together so that each tray would look like it had this gorgeous little fall themed painting painted right into the middle of the tray. That was what I was going for anyway. Just like I did with the larger tray in DIY number 1. I used hot glue and jute twine from Dollar Tree and wrapped the handles on both of the trays with the twine, just to give them a little bit of embellishment. And plus, I used some nautical rope from Dollar Tree to line the inside bottom of that corn tray, and that was also just for a little bit more embellishment. And this is how my fall decor mini trays turned out. I really liked these mini trays, maybe even more than the larger tray from DIY number 1. I think that both the rooster and the corn are oh so farmhouse fabulous, and they literally scream fall season to me. But I want to know what you think. Let me know in the comments how you feel about these 2 mini trays and if you feel they have that farmhouse essence. And these are all my fall decor decoupaged trays. I hope that the mini tutorial on printing your own custom tissue paper at the beginning of this video was informative, and I really do hope you all give that a try, especially with the holiday season coming up. Just think of the gift possibilities if you can print your own tissue paper to use for gifts. Let me know in the comments if you would have any interest in a more in-depth tutorial on creating that personalized tissue paper. I mean, like where I find my images, how I prepare them, and step-by-step how-tos. If that's something you would like to see in the future, please let me know. Also, let me know in the comments which one of these trays is your favorite and why. I hope you enjoyed this Medicated Housewife DIY, and if you did, please consider hitting the like button and subscribing. It really helps out my channel. Once again, I really appreciate you watching, and a very big thank you to my subscribers. I am so thankful for all of you. Until next time, I'm the Medicated Housewife, and crafting is my medication.